"You need to leave," Mr. Harrison, the manager said, his voice flat and cold as a dead note. Behind him, the shadow of a security guard loomed, ready to escort me. Some guy in a dusty hoodie, out of their temple of pristine sound. They saw a threat, or at best, a mistake. They didn't see an architect who just wrapped a meeting for a skyline-changing project. They had no clue their whole world, built on snap judgments, was about to crack. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. One call was all it took to flip their script upside down. "My name's Ethan, and I've always believed in the honesty of raw materials. Concrete doesn't pretend to be anything it's not. Steel doesn't flex for show. Glass lets you see right through it. That's what I chase in my work as an architect. Spaces where form follows function, no lies, no fluff. My mom, Eleanor, taught me that. She built her media empire from nothing but grit, and her biggest lesson stuck with me. Let your work speak louder than your suit. That's why I stuck to jeans and a plain gray hoodie. It wasn't about rejecting status. It was about being real, being a creator, not a corporate clone. But I wasn't immune to wanting something. Not cars or watches. Those never moved me. It was sound. Pure, unfiltered sound. Mom used to play jazz records when I was a kid, and I'd sit there, eyes closed, feeling every note carve out a space in my head. That's why I'd been dreaming about the Aurelian Monarch amplifier. It wasn't just gear. It was a masterpiece of engineering, built to make music feel alive. I promised myself I'd buy one when I landed my first big paycheck from a project that mattered. And that day finally came. I'd just gotten the green light on Zenith, a skyscraper I'd poured years into designing. It was my baby, glass and steel rising into the sky, reshaping the city's silhouette. That morning, I'd been on site, walking through the construction dust, shaking hands with the crew. My hoodie was still speckled with concrete grit, but I didn't care. I'd earned my moment. The Monarch was my reward, a private celebration of sound and success. I could already picture it in my apartment, its chrome dials glowing, filling the room with music so clear it'd make time stop. So, with that wind burning in my chest, I headed downtown to Aurelian Sound. I wasn't just chasing a purchase, I was chasing a feeling, one I'd been building toward my whole life. I was still buzzing from the Zenith meeting, my boots gritty with construction dust, when I caught it, a sound that stopped me dead in my tracks. Jazz, pure and sharp, spilled out from the half-open door of Aurelian Sound. Each note was so crisp, it felt like the saxophone was right there, breathing in my face. I pushed through the heavy soundproof door, and the music wrapped around me, full and alive. Then it cut off as the door clicked shut. Silence hit like a wall. The air smelled of polished wood and fresh electronics, and the dim lights made the place feel like some exclusive club I wasn't invited to. I scanned the room. Sleek displays, leather chairs, walls lined with dark walnut. My eyes locked on the Aurelian Monarch, sitting under a spotlight like it was royalty. Its chrome finish gleamed, and those analog dials practically begged to be touched. I stepped toward it, feeling the weight of eyes on me. Chloe, the young consultant, was behind a counter, her smile freezing when she saw my work boots and hoodie. She shot a quick glance at the manager, Mr. Harrison, who was adjusting a display with the precision of a surgeon. That look they shared, it said everything. I was already out of place, and I hadn't even opened my mouth. I took my time, walking to the Monarch's stand, letting my fingers hover just above it. I could feel their stares boring into me like I was a smudge on their perfect setup. I waited. Nobody came over. Not a word, not a step. Just the hum of the room's silence, and their eyes tracking me like I might pocket something. Finally, I turned to Chloe, keeping my voice steady. "Excuse me," I said, nodding at the amplifier. "Can you set up a demo for the Monarch?" She didn't move. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she darted another look at Harrison, who was now watching me like I'd wandered into the wrong zip code. He didn't rush over, didn't bother with a greeting. He just stood there, arms crossed, sizing me up. I held his gaze, my jaw tight. I'd been here before, not this store, but this moment. The one where people decide who you are before you get a chance to show them. "I'd like to hear it," I said again, louder, making sure my words carried. Chloe hesitated, then scurried over to Harrison, whispering something. He gave a slow nod like he was doing me a favor by even acknowledging me. The air in the room felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on my chest. I stood my ground, my hands in my pockets, staring at the monarch. I wasn't just here for an amplifier. I was here for something bigger, something they were already trying to take away from me without even knowing it. Chloe didn't budge from her spot. Her eyes flicked to Mr. Harrison like she needed his permission to breathe. He glided over, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor, each step deliberate, like he owned the air in the room. His face was a mask of fake courtesy, but his eyes were sharp, slicing through me. "Can I help you?" he said, his voice smooth but laced with something colder, something that said I didn't belong. I kept my cool, pointing at the Aurelian monarch. "I'd like to hear this one," I said, clear and firm. He barely glanced at the amplifier. Instead, he sized me up again, his gaze lingering on my dusty hoodie and scuffed boots. "That's a serious piece of equipment," he said, drawing out the words like he was explaining something to a kid. "Our flagship model. Costs about as much as a decent car. The unspoken jab hung there. You can't afford it." My stomach twisted, not because I doubted myself, but because I knew that look, that tone. I'd heard it too many times growing up, in stores, at meetings, on the street. "I know what it costs," I said, locking eyes with him. "That's why I want to hear it." My voice stayed even, but inside my blood was starting to simmer. Harrison's smile tightened, like he was holding back a laugh. "We only demo flagship models for club members, or by appointment," he said, his tone now dripping with condescension. "It's about maintaining exclusivity." Exclusivity. Right. Code for you don't fit here. I raised an eyebrow, leaning in just a bit. "So, you're refusing to let me hear a product that's for sale?" I asked, keeping my words sharp but calm. His smile faltered, just for a second before it snapped back, wider and meaner. "I'd call it protecting our standards," he shot back, his voice low, like he was daring me to push harder. "If there's nothing else, please don't disrupt our other clients." He turned, dismissing me, like I was dirt he could brush off his sleeve. I didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere until I hear it," I said, planting my feet. The room felt smaller now, the air thick with tension. Chloe was staring, her hands fidgeting with a pen. A couple of other customers glanced over, sensing the shift. Harrison's face twitched, his mask cracking. He reached for the radio clip to his belt. "Frank," he said into it, his voice tight, "come to the main floor. We've got a visitor who doesn't understand no." The word hit me like a slap. Visitor. Not customer, not guest, just some guy who wandered in and needed to be dealt with. My fists clenched in my pockets, but I kept my face blank. I'd been through this before, people assuming I was less than I was. But this time, it stung deeper. I wasn't just here for music. I was here to claim something I'd earned, something they were trying to gatekeep. Frank, the security guard, appeared at the edge of the room, his heavy steps echoing. He was older, maybe 50, with tired eyes and a slouch that said he'd rather be anywhere else. But he was coming for me. Harrison stood taller now, arms crossed, his smirk back in full force. Chloe hovered behind him, mimicking his stance like she was trying to prove she belonged in his world. They thought they had me cornered. They thought this was over. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I stood there, my heart pounding, feeling the weight of every time I'd been judged, dismissed, or underestimated. This wasn't just about an amplifier anymore. It was about respect, mine, and everyone else's, who'd ever been looked at like they were nothing. I could have walked out. I could have let it go, but something in me snapped into place. I wasn't leaving without making them see me, really see me. Frank's boots thudded closer, each step a hammer on the hardwood floor. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Harrison stood there, arms crossed, his smirk sharp enough to cut glass. He thought he'd won, thought he'd put me in my place. Chloe hovered behind him, her eyes wide, like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. The other customers pretended to browse, but I could feel their glances, quick and curious. I was center stage in their little theater of judgment, cast as the guy who didn't belong. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of it all. The years of looks like Harrison's, the assumptions, the dismissals. I could have walked out, kept my head down, let it slide. But something inside me locked in, like steel snapping into place. I wasn't moving. Then my phone buzzed. The vibration cut through the silence, loud and insistent in my pocket. I pulled it out, slow and deliberate, and saw Eleanor flashing on the screen. My mom. I let a small smile tug at my lips, locking eyes with Harrison. His smirk flickered, just for a second, like he sensed something shifting. I hit answer and brought the phone to my ear. "Hey, Mom," I said, my voice steady, loud enough to carry. Harrison snorted, rolling his eyes like I was some kid bothering his mom for pocket money. "Hey, sweetheart," Mom's voice came through, calm but commanding, like she was already running the show. "You free?" I kept my eyes on Harrison. "Not really," I said. "I'm at Aurelian Sound on Madison Avenue checking out our new assets." Harrison's head snapped up at the name. His arms dropped to his sides. Chloe's pen froze mid-twirl. I didn't break eye contact. "Yeah, I'm standing by the Monarch right now," I continued, my tone casual but pointed. "But they're not too keen on letting me hear it." Mom's laugh was sharp, like she already knew where this was going. "Is that so?" she said. "Well, good timing. The deal just closed. We've got the controlling stake in their parent company. Official as of an hour ago." My smile grew, not wide, just enough to sting. Harrison's face was starting to pale like someone had pulled the plug on his confidence. I nodded, even though Mom couldn't see me. "That's great news, Mom." "Congrats," I paused, letting the words sink in for everyone listening. "So, I'm thinking my first move, as a board member, might be reviewing their customer service policies. Seems like they need some work." The room was dead quiet now. Frank stopped a few feet away, his radio crackling faintly, but he didn't move closer. His tired eyes flicked between me and Harrison like he was waiting for a new script. Harrison's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. Chloe looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. I lowered the phone for a second, just long enough to say, "You catching this, Mr. Harrison?" His eyes widened, and I saw it. The exact moment his world started to crumble. I put the phone back to my ear. "Yeah, Mom, I'll handle it from here," I said. "I'll call you back." I hung up, slipping the phone into my pocket, and let the silence stretch. Harrison's hands were shaking now, just a little, but enough for me to notice. He tried to speak, his voice catching. I didn't realize," he stammered, but I cut him off with a look. "Didn't realize what?" I said, my voice low, cold. "That I'm not just some guy in a hoodie. That I belong here as much as anyone else." He flinched, and I stepped closer. Not aggressive, just enough to make him feel the weight of my words. "You saw my clothes, my skin, and decided I was nothing," I said. "You called security to humiliate me in front of your customers. And now you're standing here realizing you just tanked your own career." I let that sit, watching his face twist with panic. Chloe was staring at the floor, her cheeks red. Frank shifted uncomfortably, like he was rethinking his whole day. I could have pushed harder, could have torn into him right there. But I didn't. I wanted him to stew in it, to feel the ground shift under his feet. "I'm still waiting on that demo," I said, nodding at the Monarch. "Or should I call my mom back and have her send someone else to handle this?" Harrison's jaw clenched, his eyes darting around like he was looking for an escape. He didn't find one. The truth was out now, and there was no undoing it. I wasn't just a customer. I was someone with power, power they didn't see coming. And in that moment, standing in their perfect polished showroom, I felt taller than I ever had. Not because of the deal, or the money, or even the Monarch. Because I'd made them see me, really see me, and they'd never unsee it. The silence in Aurelian Sound was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. My phone was back in my pocket, but the echo of Mom's words hung in the air like a verdict. Mr. Harrison stood there, frozen, his face drained of color, looking like someone had just yanked the rug out from under his whole world. His perfect suit, his polished shoes, his smug little smirk, they didn't mean a thing anymore. Chloe's eyes were glued to the floor, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Frank, the security guard, just stood there, his radio dangling in his hand, looking like he'd rather be mopping floors than dealing with this mess. The other customers were openly staring now, not even pretending to browse. I didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about me and the line I'd drawn in the sand. I took a slow step toward Harrison, my boots scuffing the pristine floor just enough to make him flinch. "So, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice low and steady, "are we doing that demo or what?" His mouth twitched, like he was trying to find words, but nothing came out. I could see the gears turning in his head, scrambling to process what just happened. A minute ago, he was king of this showroom, tossing me out like trash. Now, he was staring down the barrel of his own mistake. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes darted to Chloe, then back to me, like he was hoping for a lifeline. I didn't give him one. "Didn't know what?" I pressed, leaning in just enough to make him squirm. "That I'm not just some guy in a hoodie. That I'm the son of the woman who now owns your boss's boss. Or that you just tried to humiliate someone who's about to have a say in whether you keep your job." Harrison's face crumpled, and for a second I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me, like I was nothing, like my skin and my clothes gave him the right to judge me. I remembered the sting of his words, the way he'd called Frank to handle me, the way Chloe had mimicked his sneer. No, I wasn't letting him off that easy. "You made a choice," I said, my voice hard now. "You saw me walk in, and you decided I didn't belong. You didn't ask my name, didn't ask why I was here. You just assumed, and you were wrong." Chloe made a small noise, like a whimper, and I glanced at her. She was young, probably just trying to fit into Harrison's world, but she'd played along. She'd stood there, silent, while he tore into me. "And you," I said, turning to her, "you didn't say a word. You let this happen." Her eyes flicked up, wet and wide, but she didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. I turned back to Harrison. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, keeping my tone even but cold. "I'm not here to ruin your day. I came to hear the monarch. But you made this about something else. So now you're going to write a report. By 9 tomorrow morning, I want it on my desk. Explain your exclusivity policy. Explain why you called security on a customer who just wanted to hear a product. And explain why you thought you could treat me like I was less than you." Harrison swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. I'll do it," he said, his voice shaky. "I'm sorry, I didn't—" I cut him off with a raised hand. "Save it," I said. "I don't want your apologies. I want you to think about what you did, and I want it in writing." I glanced at Frank, who was still standing there, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him. "You can go, Frank," I said. "I'm not the problem here." He nodded, almost grateful, and shuffled back toward the door. I took one last look at the monarch, its chrome glinting under the spotlight. For a second, I could still hear the jazz that had pulled me in here, that perfect sound I'd chased. But the moment was gone. The music didn't feel the same anymore. Not in this room, not with these people. I turned back to Harrison. "You know what's funny," I said, my voice quieter now, but sharp. "You thought you were protecting your little kingdom. But you just burned it down. My family owns this place now, and we don't run things like you do." I stepped back, letting my words sink in. Harrison was trembling, his hands clasped in front of him like he was praying. Chloe was crying now, silent tears streaking her face. The customers were whispering, their heads bent together, but I didn't care. I'd said what I needed to say. I turned toward the door, my boots heavy on the floor, and paused. 9 tomorrow, I repeated, not looking back. Don't make me follow up. As I pushed through the soundproof door, the street noise hit me like a wave. Horns, footsteps, the hum of the city. I took a deep breath, the cool air clearing my head. I could have stayed, could have made them play the monarch right then and there, but I didn't want to. Not anymore. This wasn't about the amplifier. It was about something bigger. I'd walked in as a customer, but I'd walked out as someone they'd never forget. I pulled out my phone and texted Mom. Handled it. Call you later. She didn't need the details. She'd hear them soon enough. I slipped the phone back in my pocket and started walking down Madison Avenue. The city felt different now, sharper, like I'd carved out a piece of it for myself. I wasn't just Ethan, the guy in the hoodie. I was Ethan, the guy who'd made them see their mistake, and that felt better than any sound the monarch could have given me. Walking out of Aurelian Sound, I felt the city's pulse hit me. Car horns, footsteps, the low hum of life on Madison Avenue. The air was crisp, cutting through the heat still simmering in my chest. I didn't need to hear the monarch anymore. That moment wasn't about music. It was about standing my ground. Harrison's face, pale and crumbling, flashed in my mind. I didn't want his apologies. They were worthless. What I wanted was for him to sit with what he'd done, to feel the weight of his own choices. And I made sure he would. Back at my apartment that night, I called Mom. Her voice was steady, like always, but I could hear the pride in it when I told her what happened. "You handled it right," she said. Not with anger, but with power. We talked about next steps, and I laid out my plan. Firing Harrison would have been easy, too easy. It let him walk away, maybe even play the victim. No, he needed to learn. "Let's keep him," I said, "but demote him." "Make him face his own mess," Mom agreed. By the next morning, Harrison was no longer manager. He was reassigned as a senior consultant, stripped of his little kingdom, and enrolled in a 6-month ethics and anti-discrimination course. He'd have to look at every customer knowing he'd been wrong about one. I got his report at 9 sharp, just like I'd asked. It was long, full of corporate jargon, but I could read the panic between the lines. He described the salon's exclusivity policy, some nonsense about protecting the brand, and tried to spin the incident as a misunderstanding. I didn't buy it. Neither did Mom. We used that report to kickstart something bigger. Our family's new stake in the company gave us leverage, and we pushed for a full overhaul of their customer service policies. No more judging people by their clothes or skin. They rolled out blind training for staff. Workshops where employees had to serve clients without knowing anything about their appearance or background. They also started a secret shopper program to keep everyone honest. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Chloe didn't last. A week later, I heard she'd quit. I wasn't surprised. She'd stood there, copying Harrison's attitude, but I saw the shame in her eyes when it all fell apart. I didn't hate her. She was young, trying to fit in, but she'd made her choice too. I'd meant what I said to her. Figure out who you want to be. Maybe she'd think about that now, wherever she ended up. Frank, the security guard, stayed on. He sent me a handwritten note through the company, short and simple. Didn't know the full story. Sorry, I respected that. He was just doing his job, caught in the middle. The monarch showed up at my place the next day, delivered with a personal letter from the company's CEO. "We value your family's partnership," it read, all polished and careful. I didn't care about the flattery. I plugged the amplifier in, let the jazz fill my apartment, and closed my eyes. The sound was everything I'd imagined. Clean, deep, alive. But it didn't erase what happened. It didn't fix the sting of being looked at like I was less. What it did was remind me why I'd fought. Not for the machine, but for the right to be seen as more than a stereotype. Looking back, that day in the salon wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's ever walked into a place and felt invisible, judged, or pushed out. I couldn't change the world, but I could change one corner of it. Mom and I made sure of that. The company's new policies spread to other stores in the chain, and we got reports of better treatment across the board. It wasn't a fairy tale. Some employees pushed back, and change was slow, but it was real. I kept thinking about Harrison sitting in his training sessions, probably hating every second. Good. Let him sit with it. Let him learn what it feels like to be on the other side of judgment. I didn't need him to like me. I needed him to do better. And if he didn't, there'd be consequences. That's what justice looked like to me, not revenge, but accountability. A chance to fix what's broken, starting with one smug manager and one shiny showroom. 6 months later, I stood on the roof of Zenith, my skyscraper, watching the city sprawl out below me. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic, and the glass panels around me reflected the setting sun, turning the skyline into a mosaic of gold and shadow. This was my creation, steel and glass brought to life, a dream I'd built from sketches to reality. Downstairs, in my penthouse, the Aurelian monarch sat in its place, its chrome dials catching the light. I'd play it tonight. Lit jazz filled the space, but up here it was just me and the city breathing together. That day an Aurelian sound stuck with me, not the humiliation that faded, but the clarity it brought. I'd always known people judge me by my skin, my clothes, my age. But standing in that showroom, feeling Harrison's sneer and Chloe's silence, I saw it for what it was. A structure just like any building, a framework of assumptions built brick by brick, holding people back. I'd spent my life designing spaces to bring people together. Now I realized I could do more, reshape the invisible systems that kept people apart. Mom and I didn't stop at fixing one store. We launched the Blueprint Foundation a month after the incident. It wasn't just a name, it was a promise. We gave grants to young architects, designers, and engineers from underrepresented communities. Kids like I was, with big ideas, but no connections, no fancy suits. We paired them with mentors, got them into rooms they'd never been invited to. I'd sit in on their pitches sometimes, watching their eyes light up as they talked about their designs. That's what kept me going, their fire, their hunger to build something real. I thought about Harrison sometimes. Last I heard, he was still at Aurelian Sound, working through his training. I didn't check up on him. I didn't need to. The company's new policies were in place, and the secret shopper reports showed fewer complaints about bias. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Every time I turned on the Monarch, let the music wash over me, I didn't think about Harrison's apology or Chloe's tears. I thought about the bigger fight, the one for people who'd been dismissed, overlooked, or pushed out of spaces they deserved to be in. Up on that roof, with the city humming below, I felt it. My place in it all. I wasn't just building towers anymore. I was building bridges, not just for me, but for others who'd been told they didn't belong. The Monarch's sound was perfect, but it was nothing compared to the feeling of knowing I'd changed the rules of the game, and I'd keep changing them, one blueprint at a time. Thanks for sticking with my story. It wasn't just about a fancy amplifier or one bad day in a store. It was about what happens when people decide who you are before you get a chance to show them. I'm grateful to every one of you who listened, who felt that sting of being judged, or who cheered when the tables turned. Your support keeps me going, keeps me building, not just skyscrapers, but a world where people get a fair shot. Hit that like button if this hit home, and subscribe if you want more stories about tearing down walls, literal or not. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Now, I've got some questions for you. Have you ever walked into a place and felt like you didn't belong just because of how you looked or what you were wearing? What did you do? Did you push back, walk away, or something else? And what do you think real change looks like? Not just in a store, but in the world. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and I want to hear your stories. Let's keep this conversation going.